Welcome to the best of first-person episodes from Phantoms and Monsters. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of all future uploads.
Personal conflict with a reptilian. I encountered a reptilian hybrid a few years ago while attending college in Oregon. This individual was extremely manipulative with words and dangerous with its deeds. Once I told him that he was a cold-blooded bastard after he humiliated a friend. He became very angry, staring at me with a hideous glare. He said I would suffer for my disrespect. That night while studying in my dorm room, I was alarmed by a shadowy figure starting to manifest. I am sensitive to energy, so I immediately started to raise the vibration in the room. It quickly dissipated. That startled me, so I was at full alert. Later that night at approximately 2 a.m. I awoke from what I thought was a dream, but alarmed by a grotesque reptilian form on top of my body, attempting to choke me. It screeched and wailed, like it was taking great delight in my fear and pain. I struggled and finally threw the fiend off me. As it cowered on the floor glaring at me, I immediately knew it was the individual I had insulted earlier. It thrust itself at me. I reached for my pants on my desk chair in order to retrieve my pocket knife. It was choking me as I pulled the weapon from my pants pocket and toiled to open the blade. I was able to push it off, long enough to slash it across its left arm and upper chest. With a howl of rage, it ran to the wall and disappeared through it. I turned the light on to fully illuminate the room and noticed blood on the knife, bed sheets, and floor. I checked myself to make sure it wasn't my blood. I was awake the rest of the night and ready to strike if I needed to defend myself. I was exhausted in the morning, but made my way to class. I noticed the individual coming out of his dorm room. He had a bandage on his left arm in the same spot where I had cut the reptilian. He noticed me and walked directly to me nose to nose. He glared at me with those evil reptilian eyes. "Watch your back, because this isn't over," he murmured. I walked past him and made my way to class. Later that day, the dorm staff and housing administrators wanted to talk to me. While I talked to one of the dorm staff regarding this individual, the administrator blurted out, "Don't provoke him. It's important that you not cause trouble for him." The dorm staff was obviously terrified of this guy and behaved like his minions. This was startling. That same night I felt wary of a presence watching me. That sense of dread continued for several weeks until I moved off campus to avoid this hostile individual. However, I often noticed him and his acquaintances blatantly watching me when I'm on campus and in town. I know that I wasn't the only person affected by this guy, but no one ever dared to discuss it. Many strange things happened as well, including the sudden death of 2 students in that same dorm. No details of those deaths were ever disclosed, just that they died because of medical reasons. I know others are out there who are aware of the reptilians, and that there are ways that humanity can use to defend itself against them. I have been fortunate to meet several people who safeguarded themselves and family. These terrible beings are a scourge that we will continue to confront. Be safe, Mason.
San Joaquin Valley Reptilian. I am writing this statement on an incident that occurred on 10 July 2016 at approximately 6 p.m. This is not a hoax. I am not looking for publicity or any such attention. I am not sure if what I saw was a legitimate sighting, and I am more looking for answers to help me understand if what I saw was an actual alien being. So, my friend, her son, and I drove from San Diego to San Francisco for leisure on Friday to Sunday. On our way back, we were driving on the I-5 freeway southbound towards San Diego. We were approximately 10 minutes south of Los Banos. The scenery outside was barren, no buildings, structures or people, just dry grassy hills and dirt roads on the sides of the freeway. I was actually trying to get some rest when my friend the driver said, "What is that?" and pointed to the right side of the road. I immediately looked over and saw a tall figure about 6 feet tall in a thick black monk death-looking robe with a big hood. Now this was very unusual to me since it was about 90 degrees outside and in the middle of nowhere. Why would somebody be walking around dressed in a thick black hooded robe in the seat? So as we passed it, I had to get a good look at this person's face. So when I looked at it, it looked back at me. And what I saw chilled me to the bone. In this dark heavy hooded robe was a being that looked nothing like a human. It had brownish green scales with a short snout, and its eyes were large and blackish that glistened in the sun. It was unmistakable, even at about 100 feet away. It looked right at me with no expression. It wasn't carrying anything or had any equipment with it, and was walking slow and awkward, as if it were looking for something. I was scared to death, especially when it looked right at me. I thought maybe we should pull over and confront this thing, but honestly I was frozen and we kept driving. I had asked my friend if she had seen what I had seen and her 12-year-old son in the back of the car, and they verified the same thing. Again, I'm just looking to see if what I saw could be a reptilian, and if that is what other people report seeing. I really wish I would have pulled over and went back to get some evidence or a picture, but after reading some articles on reptilians, I feel I made a wise choice. I read that there may be entrances to their habitats in rural areas that may be unseen or hidden from humans. That may indicate that there may be an entrance by Los Banos off the I-5 freeway going south. I am not sure if other vehicles traveling down the road with us witnessed this sighting, but it did happen, and I am willing to swear an oath on it. I also had unusual experiences that happened when I was a child that I believe was contact with gray aliens, which is foggy, but I have some clear recollection and memories of some incidences where I may have been abducted. My mother can vouch for that and has some insight on that. But that is another subject. This is the first time I have seen a being like this. Again, I am reporting this to hopefully gain some help to determine if what I saw yesterday could have been the real deal. And I respectfully ask for discretion in this matter. Thank you for your time and I hope you can help me.
Abductee discloses reptilian encounter. In December, I was working away from home on a 24-job site operation in Indiana. I resided in an apartment 20 miles from the job site in an adjacent small town. One night I went home at an odd hour for my shift, and instead of a 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift, I worked till 3 a.m. I went back to my place and was in bed an hour or so later. The next thing I know, I woke up sometime just before the sun started rising after having an extremely intense dream. A dream that I was somehow abducted from my rented second-floor apartment and taken aboard an alien craft. Everything in my memory is very foggy, but there are specifics that are quite vivid. Unlike the abduction scenarios that I have heard of, I was brought aboard a ship. I have no idea how I got there but felt at peace and calm. I wasn't forced into some examination, nothing was forced upon me. Their faces are distorted in how I saw them at the time and in my memory. Of the 4 to 5 aliens that might have been there in the room with me, I can only remember the face of one of them. A reptilian type, or a race trying to disguise their appearance to me by looking reptilian. But the one that I remember was looking intensely at me. It was big, probably 6.5 feet tall, muscular, with a bodysuit over his chest that looked like metal and like some superhero's costume. The suit outlined the strong pectorals and muscles of its abdomen. It looked very strong, as if it could pick me up and throw me 100 yards. It was a light shade of green on the front, and the color darkened as it went to his backside. Its outfit was of a yellowish color. It was intense, no emotions on its face. But I could feel it being slightly hesitant towards the decision by the others to give me this mission. Obviously by now I have done enough research to look at photos and drawings, and read up a little bit on different alien beings that are supposedly out there. They spoke at length to me about some very important things, much of which I cannot recall. I am a pretty fervent mediator, and they asked me to do a standing mediation for them, which a few seconds into it, they seemed pleased by what I could do. In the process of our discussion, I was asked to help them, fully given a choice. Apparently, I agreed to their mission, and then they showed me to a stainless steel type of tub, and showed me this small yellow and blue submarine-looking device. It was about 1 inch tall and 3 inches long, and with a push of a button a thin long spiraling wire came whirling a foot or more out of the tip of it. On the tip of the long wire was a scary-looking triangular-shaped barb. I was more amazed than shocked, then told to get into the tub that was full of some gelatinous mixture. Though up to that point I had been calm, I was beginning to get rather nervous. I reluctantly got into the tub, and they put the little machine into the Kentucky jelly-type substance, and it slowly, but relentlessly, came at me. Once it was close enough to me, I tried to push it away with my hands, but it just kept coming. I had an undeniable feeling that it was trying to get to my Johnson. Once the thing was close, I have a blackout in my memory. The next thing that I remember is that I am out of the tub, away from it and back to being calm. They are telling me to ready myself to go back, and that they will erase my memory of the incident. I was confused as to why they wouldn't want me to remember everything that I was supposed to do. They told me to look for a sign in the sky, then they gave me the idea that memories of this event should eventually come back, and even more info would possibly come back with time. The next thing I know, I am back in my apartment. I woke up slowly. I wasn't startled or even thinking about the dream, though I knew I had dreamed. I then had a cigarette and went to the bathroom to urinate. While standing there in the bathroom light, I noticed something peculiar on my Johnson, but thought it to be a regular old vein or something, but when I touched it, it felt hard like a thin steel cable, about a 1 millimeter thick. It seemed to be about 2 inches long. I was to investigate further in the coming days and find out that it is much longer, even going under my pelvis bone. I was perplexed by it, but thought that I was not going to do anything about it at the moment, so I might as well try to sleep and deal with it later. I'd keep an eye on it as I wasn't at home, and didn't want to go to any doctors round that area. I went back to bed, as I felt exhausted. Upon falling asleep, I had a dream, a very vivid color dream. In the past I have had a good handful of vivid dreams. Dreams of my wife before we met, the death of a cousin, etc. And this dream was of that caliber and detail to me. I won't bore you with the details, but let's just say that the government and the feds were after me, and it might have been tied to me having this mechanism looked at by a doctor or untrustworthy person. I have a wife and a family. I cannot put them in jeopardy over this. But it doesn't end there. When I woke in a cold sweat from the dream of being tracked and chased down, I kept hearing this noise outside my apartment door. I actually heard the noise earlier when I had been up before, but was so tired then that nothing could have stopped me from sleeping. But now, as I tried to go back to sleep, the noise was irritating. So I opened the door to my apartment to see the 2 large windows at the top of the stairs were totally pulled open. This is on what must have been the coldest, windiest night during the winter. I found it very odd, but made no particular connection to anything. By now the alien dream I had prior was not even something I was thinking about. Like any old dream one might have. So here is where the last string from this life-changing night gets tied. That next night at work, when I plugged my computer in and went to my Yahoo homepage, there was a headline that immediately stood out at me. I clicked on it. It happened to be the Norway spiral clip that had just happened on December 10th. While I watched this clip, I was suddenly frozen with shock, flushed with fear, and remembered that I was to see a sign in the sky. Seeing the, at that time unexplained incident, suddenly had me remembering the odd implant in my Johnson and the upstairs windows that were oddly flung open in the middle of the night, along with the crazy dream abduction I had experienced. So there is the story of that night. There is actually much more to the story, but I'd like to at least make contact with you before I go more into more detail.
Reptilian men in black close encounter. I experienced a situation back in the 70s when I was a lot younger, and I was with an older man, a friend, and some other people I knew, his son and daughter. And we took a little trip up to the Portland area, and at that time I didn't know what I was going to experience, and we stopped off at the back of some rest building up in that area. I'm not sure exactly where, but what happened was, we all got out of the car, and we walked up the back end of this large building. We went into the rear end of this place and saw rows and rows of these metal little chairs for people to sit on, and there was about 100 people in front of us. It was a long building inside. It was at night. So anyway, and we sat down, looked around, we didn't know who was in front of us. And I noticed like 8 or 9 guys, like, you know, in suits and like a gray jacket and gray pants, like a dress type suit and pants, and they were all dressed in the same color. All the same. I asked, what was this? I didn't know what was going on. Are these FBI guys or what? So I sat for a little bit. I didn't want to take too much time. It was almost 12, so I proceeded to go by myself and leave the 3 people I was with and walked on up to right where those few fellows were all standing. I stood next to the N1 on the left side, and there was a whole row of them all together on the right. So they were all together and I stood there for a little bit, and I just had this odd feeling, and out of my side vision, or peripheral vision or side vision, whatever, there was just something odd about this guy I was standing next to. And then the color, I could tell there was something wrong with the color of his skin on his face. I thought maybe this guy has been in a fire or something. There was something wrong with this situation and I kept looking forward. I kept looking straight ahead. And plus, these guys were all really tall, unusually tall. So I decided to go ahead and turn my head and look at this person, and to my shock, I noticed the side of his neck had this gray color. It wasn't natural skin color. It wasn't green. He had, like, small scales on his skin, and it was just really odd. I turned to look up at his face because he was a lot taller than me, about 7 feet tall, and I was looking at him, at the lower part of his neck. I looked up at his face, or the side of his head, and he was looking straight ahead and not looking at me at first. Then as he started to turn his head, it would move in segments, little movements at a time, and each time his face would move, it would become invisible, his face, so it would almost become translucent. It was odd. Only his head. Of course he was wearing clothes. Anyway, suddenly, he tilted his head and looked at me with a look that he wasn't too happy with me, you know, looking at him directly. I'm looking into a face like what they call a reptilian, but not a green-skinned one. From what I know about Men in Black, what I see on TV, they never look like a reptilian-like creature, you know. This one never spoke to me. I was scared to death after I saw it, what it was. I wondered if it had claws, you know, and I thought I was standing too close to it, and I didn't want it to. I was standing right next to it and it was bigger than me. When I looked at it, it had gold eyes, big red gold eyes, and it had an unusual face. The mouth, nose, the front of its face was really unusual. It was more of a reptile-like thing, and the nose was really something. It was real flat kind of looking. Just really bizarre, and its eyes were big, and they were gold, beautiful gold, but with a vertical slit. The eye had the pupil like a cat or an alligator. I just started walking ahead of it. I just didn't want it standing next to me any longer, and eventually I just went back to the people I was with. And I asked, "Can you see those guys up there? Can you see those guys in the suits?" And they all said, yes, they could. I wasn't imagining it. They kept saying, yes, they could see them.
This is Lon Strickler. If you like this program, it would help us if you would give it a thumbs up. Then subscribe and click the bell icon so you get notification when we upload new first-person encounters. We have many more to come very soon. And by the way, if you have a suggestion or an experience of your own, please leave a comment.